So, when you picture Japan, what comes to mind? Probably those beautiful, serene hot springs, right? Places for healing, for just relaxing. But what if I told you that deep in the mountains, some of those same geothermal spots have a much darker side to them? Let's get right into this really wild 17th century mystery. And really, this is the core of the whole story. You've got these two extremes. On one side, you have the famous onsen. They're all about life, purity, rejuvenation. But then you have the Jigokudani. That literally translates to hell valleys. Yeah, these were places so deadly people were convinced they were actual literal gateways to the underworld. So imagine this. You stumble into one of these valleys. It's totally desolate, eerie, and the ground is literally boiling and hissing. For hundreds of years, the people living nearby knew something was just deeply wrong with these places. It wasn't just barren, it felt like the land itself was cursed. And what makes this so creepy is how specific the curse was. I mean, the land wasn't just dead, it was an active killer. Any living thing that flew over it, we're talking birds, even insects, would just drop dead right out of the sky. So you can imagine why the folks living near the famous, beautiful Arima hot springs thought this place had to be an entrance to hell. It just made sense, right? Now, this fear wasn't just some general, vague superstition. Oh no, it got attached to a very specific and pretty haunting story. A ghost story that was born from a really awful tragedy. And it was even written down in the 17th century collection of tales called the Kokon Hyakumonogatari Hyoban. And this legend has a super specific starting point. It all began with a Zato, that's a blind masseur or maybe a monk, who tragically wandered into the valley by accident and, well, he died. Now, when the local people kept seeing other creatures dying in that exact same area, they didn't think, what's going on with the ground here? No, they connected it all back to him. They decided his angry ghost must be lingering there, dragging anything alive down to its doom. And just like that, the legend of the Zato's curse was born. But here's where our story takes a turn. While almost everyone else saw a ghost, this one scholar from the 17th century, a guy named Yamaoka Genrin, he saw something totally different. He looked at this terrifying legend and approached it not with fear, but with something way more powerful, curiosity. And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures just how revolutionary his thinking was. I mean, back then, superstition was the go-to explanation for anything weird. But Genren, he looked at what everyone thought was a supernatural curse and thought, I bet there's a natural cause for this. He saw a puzzle that needed solving. It was basically him pitting cold, hard logic against centuries of folklore. So that really gets us to the heart of the matter. Was it really a ghost? Was this valley actually cursed by an angry spirit? Or was there something else going on? Something you couldn't see, something silent, but something way, way more real. This is where Genren basically becomes a detective. He set out to find the real killer, and his investigation wasn't going to be based on ghost stories or fear. Nope, it was all about logical deduction and his understanding of how the natural world actually works. And check this out. This table shows his method perfectly. For every single supernatural part of the curse, Genren found a logical scientific cause. So those birds just falling out of the sky, they weren't being pulled down by a ghost, they were suffocating. The dead, barren land, that was because of poisonous minerals in the soil. And the whole curse itself, it was just a natural and, yeah, very dangerous geological thing. The real culprit the killer Dren figured out was toxic volcanic gas. See, deep underground, all that geothermal heat was basically cooking minerals like sulfur and arsenic. This process released a poisonous gas that seeped up to the surface. And here's the crucial part. This gas is heavier than air. That means it would just sink and collect in low spots in the valley, creating these invisible, deadly pools. And this brings us right back to the tragic story of the Zato. His death wasn't supernatural at all. It was just a heartbreakingly logical accident. Think about it. Anyone who could see would have noticed the warning signs, right? The dead plants, the total lack of life. You'd know to keep your distance. But because he was blind, he had no way of knowing. He just unknowingly walked right into one of those invisible pockets of poison gas and was overcome. So sad. You know, what Yamaoka Genren did here is so much more than just solve one mystery.
He basically gave us a blueprint, a kind of recipe for how myths and ghost stories get made in the first place. So, step 1. It almost always starts with a real event. Usually something tragic, something human. An accident or a death that's just so sad and shocking, people feel like it needs an explanation. Okay, then you add the next ingredient, one of the most powerful human emotions there is, fear. We're talking specifically about that deep down fear of what we can't see and what we don't understand. And what happens when you mix that real tragedy with that powerful fear? Boom, you get a ghost story. It's a narrative that gives people a simple, even if it's terrifying, answer to what is actually a really complex natural question. And that right there was Gunrin's ultimate point all the way back in the 17th century. Once you understand the science behind something scary, you can replace that superstitious fear with knowledge and with, a healthy respect for how powerful our planet really is. The gates of hell weren't opening up. It was just the earth kind of breathing. So this whole story was solved centuries ago, but it leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for our own time, doesn't it? Gemrin used science to replace a ghost with geology. And it really makes you wonder, what ghosts do we have today? In our society, in our health, even in our technology. What things are we afraid of simply because they're natural phenomenon that we just haven't figured out how to measure yet?